A millionaire sits in the defendant's chair, facing devastating charges of corporate fraud that could destroy his life forever. As the judge is about to declare the case lost due to the mysterious absence of his lawyer, a child's voice echoes through the courtroom. "Your Honor, I can defend him." Everyone turns shocked to see the 7-year-old daughter of his cleaning lady raising her hand with determination. The judge initially laughs, saying this is no place for a child. But when she opens her notebook and begins to cite complex legal terms with surgical precision, silence fills the room. What no one expected was that this gifted girl had discovered something about the case that could change everything. The scent of polished wood filled Edward Santana's nostrils as his trembling fingers clutched the impeccably tailored suit that once represented success and now felt like a shroud. The grand courtroom echoed with muffled whispers, each sound reverberating like small daggers in his already torn soul. There, in the defendant's chair he never imagined occupying, the 62-year-old millionaire faced the cruelest of ironies. His generosity had become his sentence. Charges of corporate fraud danced before his eyes like mocking ghosts. Improper workplace relationships, abuse of power, moral corruption. Words he never imagined could be associated with his name, built over decades with sweat, dedication, and, most importantly, with an unwavering belief in human kindness. His thoughts drifted back to that afternoon 3 weeks ago, when he met Maria Sanchez. The 40-year-old woman, with tired but determined eyes, had arrived at his company carrying a broom and desperate hope. A single mother, tireless worker, she needed the cleaning job to support her 7-year-old daughter. Edward, touched by her plight, didn't hesitate to hire her immediately. "Mr. Santana," she had said, her voice choked, "I promise I won't disappoint you. It's just sometimes I don't have anyone to leave Sophia with when she gets out of school early." "Bring her," Edward replied without a second thought. That warm smile that had won over suppliers and clients over the years, lighting up his face. A child brings life to the environment. Besides, while you work, she can do her homework in the conference room. How had that simple, human decision turned into such an elaborate trap? Edward watched the antique clock on the courtroom wall, its hands marking 3:15 in the afternoon. His lawyer, hired by his own partner, Robert Hayes, in a gesture that at the time seemed generous, had not yet arrived. Time was running out, and the judge showed growing impatience. Robert, the name of the man he considered his right hand, his confidant, almost a brother, now left a bitter taste in his mouth. 45 years of friendship, joint construction of a business empire, sharing dreams and victories. How had he not seen the signs? The growing greed, the calculating glances, the increasingly bold suggestions about maximizing profits and cutting unnecessary costs. The district attorney, a thin man with gold-rimmed glasses, organized his papers with the precision of a predator preparing its final pounce. Edward knew that type of person. He had encountered many throughout his business career, men who saw the law as a tool of power, not an instrument of justice. "Your Honor," the prosecutor's voice cut the silence like a sharp blade. "And considering the absence of the defense, I suggest we proceed with a default judgment. The evidence against the defendant is overwhelming and—" "One moment," interrupted Judge Arthur Caldwell, a man with grey hair and a stern but not cruel look. "Let's wait a few more minutes. The right to defense is sacred in our Constitution." Edward closed his eyes, trying to control his racing breath. His mind flew to the moments he had spent watching Sophia do her homework. The girl was extraordinary. At 7, she read with fluency that impressed adults, did complex mental math, and showed a voracious curiosity about everything around her, especially about laws and justice. "Why do people need lawyers, Uncle Eddie?" she had asked one afternoon while drawing in her colorful notebook. "Because sometimes the truth needs a strong voice to be heard, little one," he had answered, stroking the girl's curly hair. How ironic that now it was his truth that desperately needed a voice, and that voice simply wasn't appearing. Time continued to pass inexorably. Edward felt the weight of the curious and judgmental gazes from the gallery. Journalists, company employees, people who once admired his career and now witnessed his downfall, or at least what seemed to be his downfall. He knew he was innocent. Every fiber of his being screamed that truth. But in a world where perception often matters more than facts, his innocence seemed insufficient in the face of the carefully fabricated evidence that Robert had orchestrated. 5 minutes, the judge announced, checking his watch. If the defense does not appear, we will proceed with the judgment. Edward felt his heart accelerate dangerously. 62 years of life, 4 decades building an impeccable reputation, all crumbling because of his naivete in trusting the wrong people and his kindness in helping the right ones. Suddenly, a clear, childish voice echoed through the imposing courtroom. "Your Honor, I can defend him." All eyes turned toward the source of the voice. Edward opened his eyes, incredulous, and saw Sofia Sanchez standing in the gallery, her small hand raised with absolute determination, holding a colorful notebook as if it were the most important legal brief in the world. The silence that fell over the courtroom was so dense, it seemed possible to cut it with a knife. Everyone present, from the judge to the journalists in the gallery, remained motionless, processing what they had just heard. A 7-year-old child had offered to defend a millionaire accused of corporate fraud. Maria Sanchez quickly rose from where she was sitting, her face flushed with shame and despair. "Sofia, darling, sit down. Please, don't interrupt Mr. Santana's trial," she whispered urgently, trying to pull her daughter back to her seat. But Sofia stood firm, her dark eyes shining with a determination that contrasted drastically with her fragile appearance. She wore a simple blue dress, lovingly mended by her mother, and shoes that had seen better days. In her small hands, she held a colorful notebook filled with neat, handwritten notes. "Mom," Sofia said with a disconcerting seriousness for her age, "Uncle Eddie didn't do anything wrong. I know because I saw everything. And if his lawyer didn't come, someone needs to defend him." Judge Caldwell adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, studying the girl with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. In 30 years of his career, he had witnessed unusual situations, but nothing comparable to this. "My young lady," the judge said with a paternal but firm voice, "I appreciate your dedication to Mr. Santana. However, our legal system requires specific qualifications to practice law. It is a regulated profession that—" "Your Honor," Sofia interrupted, her voice sounding surprisingly mature. "With all due respect, the 6th Amendment to the Constitution guarantees the right to counsel, and the 5th Amendment ensures due process, which includes the right to a vigorous defense. If there's no lawyer present and the defendant risks a default judgment, wouldn't it be just to at least hear what I have to say?" A murmur of surprise ran through the courtroom. Edward felt his heart pound, not just because of Sofia's unexpected constitutional citation, but because of the hope that was beginning to blossom in his chest. How did a 7-year-old child know the Constitution? District Attorney Henry Albright stood up with a condescending smile. "Your Honor, this is a circus. We cannot allow a child to turn this courtroom into a playground. I suggest we proceed with the trial and ignore this childish interruption." Sofia turned to the prosecutor, her eyes flashing. "It's not a game, Doctor. It's about justice, and justice has no age." She opened her notebook and flipped through some pages. "Uncle Eddie taught me that everyone deserves to be heard. If you really want the truth, why are you afraid of what a child might say?" Edward watched the scene with growing admiration and concern. Sofia showed a courage that many adults lacked, facing imposing figures of justice with impressive naturalness, but he feared the consequences that this boldness could bring to the girl and her mother. The judge drummed his fingers on the bench. clearly divided between following protocol and his curiosity about what the girl had to say. He looked at Edward, then at Maria, who kept her hands clasped in silent prayer. "Dr. Albright," the judge finally said, "considering that the appointed defense did not appear and that the defendant has a constitutional right to defense, I will allow the girl to speak, not as a lawyer, obviously, but as a witness in defense of the accused." Sophia smiled for the first time since entering the courtroom, a pure and radiant smile that momentarily illuminated that solemn environment. "Thank you, Your Honor. I promise not to waste your trust." She walked with determined steps to the front of the courtroom, climbed onto the small bench that the bailiff improvised for her to reach the microphone, and opened her notebook. Its pages revealed colorful drawings mixed with precise notes, a peculiar combination of childlike innocence and a developing, analytical mind. "Your Honor," Sophia began, her clear voice echoing through the sound system. "3 weeks ago, I started going with my mom to work at Uncle Eddie's company, not because he wanted to take advantage of her, as people are saying, but because he has a good heart and knew Mom had no one to leave me with." Edward felt his eyes well up. The simplicity and sincerity with which Sophia described his kindness contrasted painfully with the accusations weighing on him. "Every day I stayed in the conference room doing my homework," Sophia continued, flipping through her notebook. "And every day I saw Uncle Eddie being kind to everyone, to the doorman, to the secretary, to the cleaning staff. He always asked how their families were, if they needed anything." The prosecutor rolled his eyes, clearly impatient. "Then, Your Honor, this is irrelevant. We are here to judge corporate fraud, not to hear praise for the defendant's character." Sophia turned to the prosecutor with a serious expression that reminded Edward of himself in the most important negotiations of his career. "Doctor, you said Uncle Eddie offered my mom a promotion in exchange for favors, but that doesn't make sense." "And why not, young lady?" the prosecutor asked condescendingly. Sophia flipped through a few pages of her notebook and found what she was looking for. "Because my mom has only been working at the company for 3 weeks. How can someone be promoted from a job they started just yesterday? And besides," she held up a piece of paper, "I have here the conversation I heard between Uncle Rob and a strange man." The entire courtroom leaned forward. Edward felt a chill run down his spine at hearing Robert's name mentioned by Sophia. "What conversation, Sophia?" the judge asked, his voice showing genuine interest. The girl took a deep breath, as if preparing to reveal the most important secret of her life. "Last Tuesday, I was in the conference room when I heard voices in the hallway. Uncle Rob was talking to a gentleman I had never seen before. They were talking about eliminating Uncle Eddie and taking control of the company." A deathly silence fell over the courtroom. Edward felt his world spinning as Sophia's words echoed in his mind. Robert Yai, his partner of decades, planning his elimination. Sophia continued, consulting her notes. The man asked if the lawyer was instructed not to show up, and Uncle Rob had said yes, that everything was set for Edward to be convicted in absentia. Sophia's last words fell upon the courtroom like a bomb. Edward looked around and saw shocked faces, whispers of disbelief, and, at the back of the room, Robert Hayes, standing up abruptly from his seat, his face pale as paper. Robert Hayes tried to disguise his desperation with a forced smile, but his trembling hands as he adjusted his tie betrayed him completely. Edward watched his former partner with a mix of disbelief and deep pain. 45 years of friendship, joint construction of dreams, sharing successes and failures. Could all of it have been an elaborate charade? Judge Caldwell noticed Robert's agitation and gestured for him to remain seated. "Mr. Hayes, you will have an opportunity to speak at the appropriate time." He then turned to Sophia, who remained serene before the microphone, as if she were simply telling a story at dinner. "Continue, Sophia. What else did you hear in that conversation?" Sophia carefully flipped through her notebook, her small hands handling the pages with the precision of an experienced librarian. Edward watched fascinated as a 7-year-old child had developed such a meticulous organizational system. "Your Honor," Sophia said, finding the page she was looking for, "they talked about photos. The man showed some photos to Uncle Rob and said that would be enough to convince any jury. But I saw those photos and they don't show anything wrong." District Attorney Albright frowned. "What do you mean, you saw the photos? A child shouldn't have access to evidence in a judicial process." Sophia turned to him with that disconcerting seriousness that had already become her hallmark. "Doctor, I didn't take the photos. They were scattered on the conference room table last Friday when I went in to get my pencil case that I had forgotten. I thought they were pictures from the company's anniversary party, so I looked." She opened her notebook to a specific page, revealing colorful drawings that reproduced with impressive fidelity what she had seen. "In this photo here," she pointed to one of her drawings, "Uncle Eddie is helping me reach a book on the high shelf. In this other one, he's explaining how the coffee machine works to my mom. And in this one, the three of us are smiling after he gave me a chocolate." Edward felt a wave of emotion as he recognized in Sophia's drawings moments he considered precious, simple gestures of humanity that someone had twisted into malicious evidence. The girl's artistic precision was remarkable. Every detail was faithfully reproduced, from the position of the hands to the facial expressions. "But if these are normal situations," the judge inquired, "how could they be used as evidence of improper conduct?" Sophia sighed, a surprisingly mature sound coming from a child. "Because whoever took the photos cropped out important parts. In the first photo, it doesn't show that my mum was right there, cleaning the room. In the second, they cut out the part where other employees were also drinking coffee. In the third, you can't see that it was in the presence of several people during the afternoon snack." A murmur of indignation ran through the gallery. Edward saw journalists scribbling notes frantically, clearly fascinated by the turn a child was giving to the case. Maria Sanchez watched her daughter with a mix of pride and concern. She knew Sophia better than anyone in the world, knew of her exceptional intelligence, but feared the consequences of exposing such a young child to the brutality of the judicial system. "Sophia," the judge said gently, "those are very insightful observations for someone your age. How did you learn to notice such important details?" The girl smiled shyly for the first time since she began speaking. "My mom always taught me to pay attention to what's happening around me, and I really like to read about detectives and investigators. I have a collection of children's mystery books that Uncle Eddie gave me." Edward remembered the day he gifted Sophia with the book collection. The girl had been so happy that she spent hours flipping through each volume, asking questions about how detectives found clues and solved cases. He never imagined he would be cultivating the skills that would one day save him. District Attorney Albright began to show signs of nervousness. "Your Honor, while it is touching to hear the girl's observations, we must rely on concrete evidence, not on children's drawings and a 7-year-old's interpretations." "Doctor," Sophia interrupted firmly, "you said concrete evidence is important. I agree completely." She reached into a small bag she was carrying and pulled out an object that made everyone in the courtroom lean forward to get a better look. It was a small digital recorder, like the one students used to record lectures. Sophia held it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Last Wednesday, when I heard Uncle Rob talking to that strange man, I remembered the detective books and thought I should record the conversation. My teacher had lent me this recorder to practice reading at home." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Robert Hayes was visibly pale, his hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly that his knuckles were white. And what does this recording contain, Sophia?" the judge asked, his voice betraying the excitement he tried to control. Sophia looked directly at Edward, her eyes conveying a determination that transcended her age. "It contains the truth, Your Honor. The truth about who really wants to destroy Uncle Eddie and why." The prosecutor stood up abruptly. Objection. This recording, if it even exists, was obtained illegally by a minor, without the knowledge of the parties involved. Doctor, Sophia replied with impressive calm, I was playing in the hallway when I heard loud voices. I wasn't intentionally spying. And when I realized they were talking about hurting Uncle Eddie, I thought I should have proof to show someone who could help. The judge pondered for a few moments, clearly divided between legal questions and his curiosity about the recording's content. But the recording may be questionable from a legal standpoint, but considering the exceptional circumstances of this case and the fact that it was made by a minor without criminal intent, I will admit it as evidence. Sophia smiled and prepared to play the recording. Your Honor, before I play it, I need to warn you that some words are hard to understand because they spoke quietly. But there's a very clear part where they talk about eliminating Edward from the path and taking the entire company. Edward felt his heart race. He was finally going to hear the betrayal being planned by the voice of the man he considered a brother. But simultaneously, he felt immense gratitude for the courageous girl who had risked everything to defend him. Robert Hayes stood up abruptly. This is absurd. I won't sit here listening to a child's fantasies. But his voice trembled, and everyone in the courtroom could perceive the desperation behind his indignation. Sophia pressed the play button on the recorder, and the unmistakable voice of Robert Hayes began to echo through the courtroom, sealing his fate and freeing Edward from the trap that had almost destroyed him. Robert Hayes's voice filled the courtroom with a coldness that Edward had never perceived in 45 years of acquaintance. It was as if he were listening to a stranger, someone who had used the mask of friendship to hide the soul of a predator. Edward is so naive, always has been. This story about the cleaning lady and her daughter is perfect. We can use it to frame him under the contract's improper conduct clause. A second voice, harsh and calculating, responded, "And are you sure the lawyer won't show up for the trial?" "Absolutely. I paid enough to ensure she has a very convenient family emergency. Edward will be tried in absentia, lose everything, and I'll finally have total control of the company." Edward felt his blood run cold. The betrayal was even deeper than he had imagined. Robert had not only orchestrated the false accusations, but had also corrupted his own lawyer. He looked at the man he considered a brother, seeing now a stranger with cold, calculating eyes. The recording continued, each word a dagger to Edward's heart. "And if anyone suspects anything?" the unknown voice asked. "Who's going to suspect? Edward trusts me blindly. He even signed powers of attorney, giving me authority to manage part of the business in case of temporary incapacity. The idiot didn't even read what he was signing properly." Sophia watched the reactions in the courtroom intently. Her small face showed deep sadness as she saw how her revelations affected Edward. The girl understood, with an impressive maturity for her age, that she was witnessing the moment someone discovered their entire life had been a lie. Maria Sanchez wept silently in her seat, torn between pride for her daughter's courage and the horror of discovering that her family had been used as pawns in a cruel game of power and greed. Judge Caldwell took notes frantically, his face showing increasing indignation with every word of the recording. In 3 decades of his career, he had rarely witnessed such calculated and cruel betrayal. Robert's voice continued on the recording. "The photos you took turned out perfect, cropped just right. They seem to show exactly what we need them to show. And the best part is, Edward doesn't even suspect. He thinks he's being kind to the woman and the child. And after he's convicted? Simple. With the powers of attorney and the contractual clauses, I take full control. Edward loses everything, the company, his reputation, his freedom. And I finally get rid of the dead weight he's become with this obsession with social responsibility and human treatment of employees." The recording ended with the sound of footsteps walking away and a door closing. The silence that followed was so dense it seemed physical, weighing on everyone present like a tombstone. Robert Hayes had become a pillar of salt, his face livid, contrasting with his dark suit. His hands trembled visibly, and Edward could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the courtroom's air conditioning. District Attorney Albright was clearly shaken. The evidence he considered solid had just turned into quicksand beneath his feet. He looked at his papers, then at Robert and then at Sophia, as if trying to mentally reorganize the entire case. "Your Honor," Sophia said, carefully putting the recorder back in her bag. "Can I continue talking about the other things I saw?" The judge nodded, still processing the impact of the recording. "Of course, Sophia. Please, tell us everything you observed." The girl flipped through her notebook again, stopping at a page filled with numbers and times written in neat handwriting. After I heard that conversation, I started paying more attention to what was happening at the company, and I noticed strange things. Edward leaned forward, fascinated by the girl's analytical ability. How had someone so young managed to detect irregularities that he, with decades of business experience, had not noticed? "What kind of things, Sophia?" the judge asked. "First, strange people appeared at the company and always talked only with Uncle Rob. They never greeted Uncle Eddie, even when they passed him in the hallway. That was strange because Uncle Eddie knows everyone and always greets everyone." Sophia turned the page of her notebook, revealing a meticulously organized list. "Second, Uncle Rob started coming in earlier and leaving later, but always when Uncle Eddie wasn't there, and he would tamper with papers in Uncle Eddie's office when he thought no one was watching." Robert tried to stand up again, but the judge firmly gestured for him to remain seated. "Mr. Hayes, you will have an opportunity to defend yourself. At the moment, I am listening to the girl's testimony." "Your Honor," Sophia continued, "I also saw Uncle Rob duplicating keys. Last Thursday, he was at the reception with a strange device, making copies of Uncle Eddie's keys. When he saw me looking, he said he was organizing the keys for a surprise." Edward felt a wave of nausea. Robert had duplicated his keys, probably to plant false evidence in his office or safe. The depth of the betrayal seemed to have no limits. "And there's one more important thing," Sophia said, her voice growing more serious. "Yesterday morning, before coming to court, I saw Uncle Rob talking to a woman in the company parking lot. It was the lawyer who was supposed to defend Uncle Eddie. She was returning an envelope to him and saying that the job was done." The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. The legal profession had been corrupted, the justice system had been manipulated, and only a 7-year-old child had had the courage and intelligence to expose the entire conspiracy. Judge Caldwell brought his gavel down hard on the bench. "Mr. Hayes, stand up. Considering the evidence presented, I order your immediate arrest for conspiracy, falsification of documents, corruption, and attempted obstruction of justice." But when everyone turned to the bench where Robert was sitting, they discovered that he had silently disappeared during Sophia's testimony. The predator had fled, leaving behind only the echo of his betrayal and the destroyed life of a man who had believed in true friendship. Edward looked at Sophia, who was observing him with eyes full of compassion. At that moment, he understood that he had found something much more valuable than the partner he had lost. He had found a true family, built not on interests, but on genuine kindness and extraordinary courage. The bailiff returned to the courtroom 15 minutes later, breathless and visibly frustrated. "Your Honor, the suspect has not been located. His vehicle was found abandoned in the parking lot, but he disappeared." Edward remained seated in the defendant's chair, now ironically transformed into the place where the truth had been revealed. He felt simultaneously relieved and shattered. Justice was being served. His innocence had been proven, but the emotional cost of the discovery was devastating. 45 years, almost half a century of friendship, mutual trust, joint building of dreams. How had Robert managed to fake it so well for so long? Edward mentally relived thousands of shared moments, trying to detect signs that at the time seemed insignificant, but now gained a sinister meaning. Judge Caldwell organized the papers on his desk, clearly shaken by the events he had just witnessed. "Mr. Edward Santana," he said in a solemn voice, "considering the evidence presented by young Sofia Sanchez, I declare you innocent of all charges. The case is dismissed immediately." A collective sigh of relief ran through the gallery. Journalists began making frantic calls, company employees whispered among themselves, and Maria Sanchez finally allowed tears of gratitude to roll freely down her face. But Edward couldn't feel joy. He looked at his own hands, trying to understand how he had been so blind. Robert had always shown ambition, but Edward had interpreted that as dedication to business. The occasional comments about maximizing profits and cutting unnecessary costs seemed like legitimate business suggestions, not signs of corrosive greed. Sofia stepped down from the small improvised bench and walked over to Edward. Her steps were hesitant, as if she sensed the deep pain her revelations had caused the man she had tried to protect. "Uncle Eddie," she said in a small voice, "I'm so sorry I had to tell you those things about Uncle Rob. I know you two were friends for a long time." Edward looked at the girl and felt his heart warm for the first time in weeks. There was a 7-year-old child showing more compassion and wisdom than many adults he had known throughout his life. "Sofia," he said, his voice choked, "you have nothing to apologize for. You saved me. You saved not only my freedom but my dignity. How can I thank such a small person for such a grand gesture?" The girl smiled shyly and extended her colorful notebook to Edward. "You can keep my drawings and notes. Maybe they'll help the police find Uncle Rob and find out if he did this to other people too." District Attorney Albright approached, his face still showing the shock of having been misled by fabricated evidence. "Mr. Santana, on behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I offer a formal apology. We were victims of an elaborate conspiracy. We will ensure that all individuals involved are investigated and prosecuted." Edward nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the company employees, the decisions he would need to make, the necessary rebuilding after the betrayal. How could he trust business partners again? How to distinguish between genuine loyalty and disguised self-interest? Maria Sanchez approached with hesitant steps. "Mr. Santana, we don't know how to thank you. Sofia always said you were special, different from other bosses I've had. Now I understand why." "Maria," Edward said, finally rising from the defendant's chair, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, the faith that there are still good people in the world." Judge Caldwell struck his gavel one last time. "Before we adjourn this session, I would like to record for the official record that I witnessed something extraordinary today. A 7-year-old child demonstrated more courage and integrity than many experienced professionals. Sofia Sanchez, you have a brilliant future ahead of you." Sofia blushed and hid behind her mother, suddenly shy amidst the praise. But Edward could see the spark of determination in her eyes. That girl would be special, not just for her exceptional intelligence, but for the moral courage that few adults possessed. As the courtroom emptied, Edward remained seated, processing the magnitude of what had happened. In a matter of hours, his life had gone from the brink of ruin to complete vindication. But the emotional scars of betrayal would remain for a long time. Sofia returned to him, carrying only her small recorder. "Uncle Eddie, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, little one." "Are you going to be okay? I know you're sad about Uncle Rob, but sometimes bad people do bad things, and it's not our fault for not noticing." Edward felt his eyes well up again. How could a child express with such simplicity truths that he was struggling to accept? "Sofia," he said, kneeling to be at the girl's height, "you just taught me something very important. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists in the world." The girl smiled and impulsively hugged Edward. "Will you still be our friend? Forever?" Edward promised, feeling that he could finally glimpse a future beyond the pain of betrayal. But as he hugged Sophia, a concern grew in his mind. Robert had fled, but men like him rarely gave up easily. Were there other accomplices in the conspiracy? Was the corrupted lawyer just the beginning of a larger network of corruption? Edward looked at Maria and Sophia, now his moral and emotional responsibility, and understood that the battle for justice was just beginning. Robert might have fled, but he had left behind a trail of destruction that needed to be undone, and Edward was determined to protect his new family from any retaliation that might come. 3 days after the trial, Edward walked through the corridors of his company with a strange sense of unfamiliarity. Everything seemed the same walls, the same furniture, the same employees. But his perception had drastically changed. Every corner could hide a betrayal. Every smile could mask a conspiracy. The office Robert had occupied for decades remained sealed by the police. Edward passed by it several times a day, unable to avoid looking through the frosted glass of the door. Inside were 45 years of a friendship he now discovered had been one-sided. Mr. Santana. Sophia's voice pulled him from his melancholic thoughts. The girl was standing next to Maria, who was carrying her cleaning supplies. But there was something different in Sophia's face, a concern that didn't match her 7 years of age. "What's wrong, little one? You seem restless." Sophia exchanged a meaningful glance with her mother before replying. "Uncle Eddie, last night a strange man showed up at our house. He said he was from the police. But he didn't show any identification when Mom asked." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of man? What did he want? Maria approached, her face showing the same concern as her daughter. He was tall, thin, wore dark glasses even though it was night. He said he needed to speak with Sophia about her testimony in court, that there were some inconsistencies that needed to be clarified. But Mom was smart, Sophia added with a proud smile. She said she'd only talk in the presence of a lawyer and at the official precinct. The man got nervous and left. Edward felt a mix of pride for Maria's quick thinking and growing concern for both of their safety. Robert was a fugitive, but he clearly hadn't given up. Men like him, accustomed to power and control, didn't accept defeats easily. "You both did very well," Edward said, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm Sophia further. "But I think it's best we take some precautions. How about you both come stay at my house for a few days?" Maria was visibly uncomfortable with the suggestion. "Mr. Santana, we don't want to bother you. We've already caused so much trouble." "Maria," Edward interrupted gently, "after everything you've done for me, considering you a bother would be the greatest ingratitude in the world. My house has enough rooms, and honestly, I'd feel safer knowing you're protected." Sophia tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, Uncle Eddie has a huge library. You said I could read more books about investigators." Despite the tension of the moment, Edward smiled. Sophia's thirst for knowledge was insatiable, and her passion for mysteries and investigations had intensified after the events in court. "Actually," Edward said, having a sudden idea, "Sophia, how about we start our own investigation? You've shown impressive detective skills. Maybe we can find out more about Robert's network." Sophia's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really, Uncle Eddie? I can help investigate for real." "Of course, but with one condition. Always with adult supervision and never putting yourselves in danger." That afternoon, the three settled into Edward's home library. The girl was fascinated by the number of books, especially an entire section dedicated to biographies of famous investigators and historical criminal cases. Edward had contacted a private investigator recommended by the police, a former detective named Carlos Mendoza. The 50-year-old man, with grey hair and perceptive eyes, arrived late in the afternoon to discuss the case. "Mr. Santana," Mendoza said, consulting his notes, "we've gotten some information about your former partner. Robert Hayes didn't act alone. There's an organization that specializes in acquiring companies through blackmail and false accusations against owners. Edward felt his blood run cold. An organization? How many people could be involved? From what we've discovered so far, at least 10 people in different positions: corrupt lawyers, unscrupulous private investigators, clerks willing to falsify documents. It's a sophisticated scheme. Sophia, who was pretending to read a book but clearly paying attention to the conversation, looked up. "Mr. Mendoza, can I ask a question?" The investigator looked at the girl with curiosity. "Of course, Sophia. I heard about your brilliant performance in court. If they do this with many companies, there must be a pattern, right? A way to choose victims, a method of operation, maybe even the same types of accusations." Mendoza was impressed by the question. "Exactly. We're investigating other similar cases from the last 5 years, and you're right, there's a defined pattern. And if we find that pattern," Sophia continued with growing enthusiasm, "we can predict what they'll do next and maybe find where Uncle Rob is hiding." Edward looked at Sophia with growing admiration and concern. The girl had not only saved his life, but continued to demonstrate an analytical capacity that rivaled professional investigators. "Sophia is right," Mendoza said. "In fact, I'm starting to believe that you may have dismantled a much larger operation than we initially imagined." But while they talked, Edward couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He looked out the library window and saw a shadow moving among the trees in the garden. "Carlos," he said discreetly, "I think we have company." The investigator followed Edward's gaze and immediately positioned himself protectively. Maria, Sophia, get away from the windows. Now, Sophia, however, had already noticed the strange movement. "Uncle Eddie, that's the same man who showed up at our house last night." The hunt had begun, and Edward understood that protecting his new family would be much more complicated than he imagined. Robert and his accomplices were not willing to give up easily, and Sophia's courage, which had saved them once, could now put them in even greater danger. The discovery happened completely unexpectedly. While Carlos Mendoza checked the perimeter of the house and Edward installed additional security cameras, Sophia played silently in the library, flipping through the investigation books that fascinated her so much. That's when she found something that would completely change the course of the entire investigation. "Uncle Eddie!" Sophia's voice echoed through the house with an urgency that made everyone run to the library. "And I need to show you something very important." Edward found the girl kneeling on the floor, surrounded by documents she had taken from inside an old criminology book. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and concern. "Sophia, where did you find these papers?" Edward asked, kneeling beside her. "They were hidden inside this book on criminal investigation," Sophia explained, showing a leather-bound volume. "The pages were false. There was a secret compartment. Look what's in here." The documents were photocopies of contracts, correspondence, and handwritten notes. But what most caught Edward's attention was the header of one of the letters: Operation Acquisition, Phase Beta. Carlos Mendoza took the documents and examined them carefully. His face became progressively more serious as he read. "My God," he finally murmured. "Sophia, you just found the criminal organization's operations manual." Maria approached, concerned by the general agitation. "What kind of manual?" "Mom," Sophia said, "organizing the papers according to dates. These are instructions on how they choose victims, how they fabricate evidence, and how they take control of companies." But there's something even more unsettling. Edward took the document Sophia was pointing to. It was a list of names, and his blood ran cold as he recognized several well-known businessmen who had mysteriously gone bankrupt in recent years. "These men," Edward said, his voice trembling, "I knew them. I thought they had financial problems or personal scandals. In reality, they were victims of the same organization. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Sophia had separated a specific document, an internal correspondence from the organization that revealed something shocking. "Uncle Eddie," Sophia said, her voice showing a startling maturity. "Uncle Rob wasn't the head of this operation. He was just an employee." "What do you mean?" Mendoza asked, taking the document from the girl's hands. Sophia pointed to a signature at the bottom of the letter. "Look who signs as General Coordinator of the operation." Edward read the name and felt the world spin around him. The signature was of someone he had known even longer than Robert. Someone he trusted completely. District Attorney Henry Albright, the prosecutor who had led his prosecution. "This is impossible," Edward whispered. "Henry has been a district attorney for decades. His reputation is impeccable." "Uncle Eddie," Sophia said gently, "sometimes the people who seem most trustworthy are the most dangerous. They use our trust against us." Mendoza was frantically flipping through the other documents. "Here it is," he said, finding what he was looking for. A letter from Albright to Robert, giving specific instructions on how to conduct the operation against you. He knew everything from the beginning. The realization hit Edward like lightning. The prosecutor had not been deceived by false evidence. He had helped create it. The entire legal process had been a farce from the very first moment. "But then," said Maria, processing the information, "if the district attorney is involved, how do we know who we can trust in the justice system?" It was the question everyone feared asking. If justice itself was compromised, how could they seek protection or redress? Sophia stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden where they had seen the mysterious man. "Uncle Eddie, I think I know why they're following us." "Why, little one?" "Because they don't know that we found these documents. They think we only know about Uncle Rob. But now we know about the entire organization." Edward immediately understood the implication. They want to silence us to protect Robert, but in reality, they're protecting a much larger network. "Exactly," Sophia confirmed. "And if we can prove that Albright is involved, the entire organization can be exposed." Mendoza was taking notes quickly. "We need to act very carefully. If Albright is really behind this, he has access to legal resources that can be used against us. It needs to look like we're only investigating Robert. Like a chess game," Sophia observed. "We pretend we don't know about the king while we capture the pawns." Edward looked at the girl with growing admiration and concern. Sophia had become the central piece of an investigation that could bring down a network of corruption that extended to the highest echelons of the judicial system. "Sophia," he said seriously, "do you understand that we are now dealing with people much more dangerous than Robert?" The girl nodded, her eyes showing a determination that transcended her age. "Yes, Uncle Eddie, but I also understand that if we don't do anything, they will continue hurting other families like they almost hurt ours." At that moment, Edward realized that he had completely underestimated the situation. They were no longer dealing with the betrayal of a greedy partner, but with a sophisticated criminal organization that had infiltrated the very system of justice. And at the center of this battle was a 7-year-old girl who had become, involuntarily, the greatest threat that this organization had ever faced. Outside, hidden among the trees, the mysterious man spoke into his phone in a low voice. "We have a bigger problem than we thought." The child found the phase beta documents. The response from the other end of the line was cutting. "Then maybe it's time to implement the final phase." The morning following brought a deceptive calm that made Edward feel even more restless. He had installed a sophisticated security system during the night, but he knew he was dealing with adversaries who had resources and connections he still didn't fully comprehend. Sophia had woken up before everyone and was in the kitchen, eating breakfast while studying the documents found in the book. Edward was impressed by the methodology she had developed. She had organized everything in chronological order and created a diagram connecting the different operations. "Good morning, little detective," Edward said, pouring himself coffee. "Found anything new?" Sophia raised her eyes from her notes. and Edward noticed dark circles around them. The girl had slept little, clearly worried about the implications of her discovery. "Uncle Eddie, I think I understand how they choose victims." Sophia showed a list she had compiled. All the attacked businessmen had 3 things in common. They were very generous with employees, had no close family to defend them, and had long-time partners they trusted completely. Edward felt a chill. The description fit his profile perfectly. They study their victims for years before striking. Exactly. And there's one more concerning thing. Sophia pointed to some handwritten notes in the margins of the documents. They call people like you ideal targets, because your kindness can be easily twisted as evidence against them. Maria entered the kitchen at that moment, carrying a small bag. Her face showed a determination Edward hadn't seen before. "Mr. Santana," she said firmly, "I need to tell you something important. Last night, after Sophia fell asleep, I kept thinking about all this, and I came to a conclusion." Edward realized by the seriousness of her tone that Maria had made a significant decision. "What is it, Maria?" "We can't run forever, and we can't let these people continue destroying families." Maria sat next to her daughter. "Sophia and I want to help put an end to this organization once and for all." Maria: "It's very dangerous. You've already done more than enough." "No, Uncle Eddie," Sophia interrupted. "Mom is right. If we don't stop them now, they'll keep hurting other people. And I have an idea of how we can do it." Edward looked at mother and daughter, seeing in them a determination that reminded him of himself when he was younger and believed that one person could make a difference in the world. "What's your idea?" "Sophia?" The girl opened her notebook to a page full of diagrams and arrows. "We can use the organization against them. Pretend we're more naive than we really are and let them think they're controlling us." Carlos Mendoza arrived at that moment, bringing news that would complicate the situation even further. "Edward, we have problems. During the night, someone broke into your office at the company and stole several important documents." "What kind of documents?" Edward asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Contracts, powers of attorney, financial records. Everything Robert could use to take legal control of the company in your absence." Sophia stood up quickly. "Mr. Mendoza, they stole the papers because they're going to try a new strategy. If they can't incriminate Uncle Eddie, they're going to try to take over the company another way." "What do you mean, Sophia?" "Simple. They're going to forge documents showing that Uncle Eddie was mentally incapacitated when he let me defend him in court. They're going to use that to annul all recent business decisions and give Uncle Rob legal power to manage everything." Edward felt his blood run cold. Sophia's analysis made perfect sense. "That means even being innocent. I could lose everything." "Not if we act first," Sophia said with determination. "Uncle Eddie, do you trust me? Completely?" "Why?" Sophia exchanged a meaningful glance with her mother. "Because I have a plan that can expose the entire organization. But it will require you to pretend to be defeated and let me seem like I'm helping them." Maria took her daughter's hand. "Sophia, this is too dangerous for a child." "Mom, I'm not a normal child. And normal people can't stop bad people." Sophia looked at Edward with eyes that showed a wisdom beyond her years. "Uncle Eddie, if I can get Albright to confess everything, recorded, do you think that would be enough to bring down the organization?" Edward understood that Sophia was proposing to put herself in direct danger to protect everyone else. "Sophia, I can't allow you to risk yourself like that. You've already taught me, Uncle Eddie," Sophia said softly, "that sometimes we need to be brave to protect the people we love. Now it's my turn to protect our family." The word family hit Edward like a lightning bolt. That's what they had become to him. Not just people he protected, but people who protected him back. A family built not on blood, but on mutual love, trust, and courage. Mendoza studied Sophia's face with growing admiration. "What kind of plan do you have in mind?" Sophia smiled. And for the first time since discovering the documents, Edward saw the 7-year-old child behind the brilliant mind. "I'll pretend I want to help D.A. Albright because I'm mad at Uncle Eddie for putting Mom and me in danger. Kids do that sometimes when they're scared. They turn against the people they love." "And how would that expose Albright?" Edward asked. "Because he'll want to use my betrayal to legitimize the new accusations against you. And when he's boasting about how clever he is, I'll be recording everything." Edward looked at Sophia, then at Maria, then at Mendoza. They all seemed to understand that they had reached a crucial point. They could continue running and hiding, or they could take a final stand against an organization that had destroyed countless lives. "Sophia," Edward finally said, "if we're going to do this, we need a perfect plan. One mistake and we lose everything." Sophia nodded seriously. "Then we'd better start planning, because I bet they're already planning their next move." As if destiny were listening to her words, Edward's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" "Edward," a familiar voice said, making his blood run cold. It was D.A. Henry Albright. "We need to talk. It seems your young friend found some documents she shouldn't have." Edward put the phone on speaker, allowing everyone to hear the conversation. D.A. Albright's voice sounded calm and controlled, but there was an underlying coldness that reminded Edward of how he had been manipulated throughout the entire legal process. "D.A. Albright," Edward said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "How did you get my private number?" "Edward, do you really believe we lack the resources to obtain basic information?" The prosecutor's laugh was chilling. "But I didn't call to threaten you. On the contrary, I want to propose a deal that will benefit everyone." Sophia gestured to Edward, indicating she wanted to speak. Edward hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "D.A. Albright," Sophia said in an apparently timid voice, very different from the determination she had shown minutes earlier. "It's Sophia. Can I say something?" "Of course, my dear. How are you feeling after all this confusion?" "I'm scared," Sophia replied, and Edward was impressed by her acting ability. "Mum and I are hiding at Uncle Eddie's house, but he's saying strange things about fleeing the country. I think he's gone crazy." Edward swallowed hard. Sophia was implementing her risky plan without warning. "What kind of strange things?" "Sophia," Albright's voice showed growing interest. "He keeps pacing the house, talking to himself about conspiracies and people trying to get him. And yesterday he yelled at Mom when she said she wanted to go back home." Sophia paused convincingly. Albright, do you think Uncle Eddie might actually be going crazy?" Maria looked at her daughter with a mix of pride and terror. Sophia's acting was so convincing that for a moment she herself almost believed it. "Sophia," Albright said in a paternal voice, "it's possible that the stress of the trial has affected Mr. Santana's mind. Sometimes people who go through very difficult situations develop paranoia and erratic behavior." "That's it!" Sophia exclaimed with fabricated enthusiasm. "Paranoia! He keeps saying someone's trying to steal his company and that even you are involved. That's crazy, right?" Edward saw Mendoza taking notes quickly, recording every word of the conversation that could be used as evidence later. "Very crazy," Albright agreed, and Edward could practically hear the malicious smile in his voice. "Sophia, you and your mother need protection. How about you come talk to me in my office? I can explain some legal options to ensure you stay safe." "Can I bring the papers he keeps messing with all the time? He says they're super important, but to me, they just look like scribbles." Edward felt his heart race. Sophia was offering the documents as bait. "What kind of papers, dear? I don't know. There's a lot of handwritten stuff, some with other people's names, addresses. He keeps saying they're evidence of something, but when I ask evidence of what, he starts yelling. It would be very helpful if you brought those papers, Sophia. I can analyze them and determine if they pose any danger to you and your mother." Sophia looked at Edward, who nodded gravely. The plan was working. Albright was biting the bait. Okay, D.A. Albright, but there's a problem. Uncle Eddie doesn't want Mom and me to leave the house. He locked all the doors and said it's dangerous. That's concerning. It shows he's really losing touch with reality. Albright paused, calculating. Sophia, do you think you could leave the house without him noticing, just for a quick chat? I think so. He sleeps a lot during the day now. Keeps taking some weird pills. Edward admired Sophia's ability to create convincing details that painted a picture of mental instability. Perfect. How about this afternoon, at 3 o'clock? My office is downtown. Do you know where it is? Yes, I do. Mom and I can take a cab. Sophia paused, as if hesitating. D.A. Albright, do you promise you'll protect Mom and me? I'm scared of what Uncle Eddie might do if he finds out we left the house. I promise, dear. In fact, I can arrange for permanent police protection for you, armed men who will ensure Edward can never harm you again. Edward felt a chill. Albright was revealing his true intentions, not protection, but complete control over Sophia and Maria. Thank you very much, D.A. Albright. I'll convince Mom to come with me. See you soon. Sophia hung up the phone, and immediately her expression changed to an impressive seriousness. We did it, she said simply. Sophia, that was incredible, Mendoza said with admiration. But do you understand the risk you're going to take? Albright is extremely dangerous. I know, Sophia replied, but now he thinks I'm a naive child who can be manipulated. And when people think they're smarter than us, they make mistakes. Maria pulled her daughter into a tight hug. My little one, I'm so proud of you, but also so scared. Mum, remember what you always tell me, that sometimes we have to do things that scare us if we want to protect the people we love. Edward watched the interaction between mother and daughter, feeling a profound emotion. Sophia was ready to put herself in extreme danger to protect her new family, showing a courage that few adults possessed. All right, Edward finally said, let's do this. But with every possible precaution. Mendoza, how many trustworthy men do you have available? 5 investigators who worked with me on the force, all reliable. Sophia, Edward said, kneeling to be at the girl's height, I'm going to equip you with a tracking device and an audio transmitter. If anything goes wrong, we'll be listening to everything and we'll know exactly where you are. Sophia nodded seriously. And you'll be close, right? Hidden, but close. 2 blocks away, at most. With equipment to breach the building in under 3 minutes if necessary. Then let's do this, Sophia said with determination. Let's put an end to this organization once and for all. But as they all prepared for the riskiest operation of their lives, none of them imagined that D.A. Albright had already anticipated the possibility of being recorded and had prepared a trap even more elaborate than anyone could imagine. The next 2 hours were the most tense of Edward's life. The house had transformed into an improvised operations center, with Mendoza coordinating his men while Sophia was equipped with disguised surveillance devices. The audio transmitter was tiny, the size of a button, and was discreetly sewn into the collar of Sophia's dress. The GPS tracker was placed in the heel of her right shoe, invisible but capable of transmitting her exact location. Sophia, Mendoza said, testing the equipment for the 3rd time. Remember, keep the conversations long. The more Albright talks, the more evidence we'll have. And if he says anything that makes you feel in danger, say the phrase, I need to call my Aunt Carol. That's the signal for us to breach the building immediately. Sophia nodded, but Edward could see the tension in her small shoulders. As mature as she was still a child about to face an experienced predator. Little one, Edward said, kneeling before her, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. Uncle Eddie, Sophia interrupted gently, how many families has this organization destroyed? Edward consulted the documents found. From what we know, at least 15 in the last 5 years. And how many more will they destroy if we don't stop them? Edward understood that Sophia had made her decision based on solid moral principles, not childish impulse. "You're right, but promise you'll be extremely careful." "I promise." Sophia hugged Edward tightly. "And promise you'll take care of Mom if something happens to me." Maria, who had remained silent during the preparations, quickly approached. "Sofia Sanchez, I don't want to hear that kind of talk anymore. You're going into that office, you're going to get the confession we need, and you're coming home safe and sound. Understood?" Sophia smiled for the first time that day. "Yes, Mom, sorry." At 2:45, a cab pulled up in front of the house. Sophia and Maria got in, carrying a folder with selected copies of the documents found, copies that Mendoza had carefully prepared, omitting the most sensitive information. Edward and Mendoza followed in a separate car, keeping a safe distance. 3 other vehicles with Mendoza's investigators spread out strategically along the route, creating an invisible protective net. "Edward," Mendoza said as he drove, "I know it's hard, but I need you to stay calm. Sophia is smarter and braver than many agents I've known. She'll succeed." Edward watched the red dot on the tracking device, marking Sophia's location. "Carlos, what if we're underestimating Albright? What if he finds out Sophia is recording? That's why we have Plan B and Plan C." Mendoza pointed to a commercial building near Albright's office. "We have snipers positioned. If anything goes wrong, we can create a diversion that will allow us entry." The building where D.A. Albright's office was located was impressive. 20 stories of glass and steel, representing power and success. Sophia and Maria entered through the main lobby, and Edward could briefly see them through the security cameras that Mendoza had hacked. "Audio coming through," one of the investigators announced over the radio. Sophia's voice echoed clearly through the communication system. "Mom, are you sure it's here? It looks too fancy for a prosecutor." "It is, honey. 15th floor." Edward felt his heart race as the elevator began to ascend. Each floor felt like an eternity. "We're here," Sophia whispered, and Edward imagined his adopted daughter taking a deep breath to prepare for the performance of her life. The office door opened, and D.A. Albright's unmistakable voice filled the audio system. "Sophia, Maria, so glad you could make it. Come in, please." "Wow," Sophia said with feigned admiration. "Your office is huge. D.A. Albright." "Thank you, dear. Have a seat. Make yourselves comfortable. Can I offer you anything? Juice? Soda?" "Can I have an orange juice?" Sophia asked, and Edward understood that she was buying time to analyze the environment. "Of course. And you, Maria?" "Water." "Please." Edward heard the sound of footsteps and the clinking of glasses being prepared. Albright was being the perfect host, creating an atmosphere of trust before revealing his true intentions. "So, Sophia," Albright said after a few minutes, "tell me more about Mr. Santana's strange behavior. I'm worried about you too." Albright, he's really weird. Last night he spent the whole night walking around the house, talking to himself about people trying to get him." "And did he mention specific names?" Edward noticed how Albright directed the questions, looking for information about how much they really knew. "Yes, he talked about Uncle Rob, which makes sense, right? But he also talked about you, and that's crazy because you're a prosecutor." "Very strange indeed. And these documents you mentioned?" "I brought some," Sophia said, and Edward heard the rustling of papers. "More, but I don't understand any of it. It looks like crazy scribbles." There was a long pause, during which Edward imagined Albright carefully examining the carefully prepared documents. "Sophia," Albright finally said, his voice subtly changing tone, "these documents are very interesting. They show that Edward discovered more than we imagined." Edward felt his blood run cold. Albright had dropped the pretense. "What do you mean, D.A. Albright?" Sophia asked, maintaining her feigned innocence. "Stop the act, little one," Albright said coldly. "You're too smart to keep pretending to be naive." The silence that followed made Edward grip the radio. "Carlos, we need to go in now." "Wait," Mendoza whispered. "Let's see how Sophia reacts." Sophia's voice, when it finally came, surprised everyone. "You're right, D.A. Albright. I knew you were too smart to believe my act. But you're also too smart to hurt me here in your own office, with my mom present, in the middle of the afternoon." Edward was impressed by Sophia's calmness in the face of exposed danger. "You're right, child. I won't harm you. On the contrary, I'm going to make you an offer that will change your lives forever." "What kind of offer?" D.A. Albright walked to his executive desk, his steps echoing in the silent office. Edward could hear every movement through the transmitter, imagining Sophia sitting in the oversized armchair, facing one of the most dangerous men he had ever known. "Sophia," Albright said in a calculatedly gentle voice, "you are extraordinary. At 7, you managed to dismantle a scheme that took me years to build. That is rare talent." "Thank you, I guess," Sophia responded cautiously. "I want you to work for me." The silence that followed was so dense that Edward could hear his own heart beating. Beside him, Mendoza adjusted the audio equipment to make sure he hadn't missed a word. "What do you mean, work for you?" Sophia finally asked. "Think about it, child. You have a gift for investigation, for analysis, for discovering secrets. With proper training, you could become the best private investigator in the country. I can offer top-quality education, universities abroad, a brilliant future." Maria interrupted for the first time. "D.A. Albright, my daughter is 7 years old. What kind of offer is this?" "An offer that will change both your destinies forever, Maria." Albright's voice took on a harder tone. "You work as a cleaning lady, earning next to nothing. Sophia attends public school, without resources to develop her exceptional talent." "I can change that." Edward felt the anger rising within him. Albright was using Maria's financial vulnerability to manipulate the situation. "And in return?" Sophia asked, with impressive maturity. "In return, you forget everything you discovered about my organization. The documents disappear, the recordings are destroyed, and Edward Santana suffers a very convenient accident." Edward felt his blood run cold. "Mendoza, they're directly threatening my life." "Calm down," Mendoza whispered. "Sophia is getting a full confession." "What kind of accident?" Sophia asked, her voice betraying only a slight tension. "Accidents happen, dear. Especially with older men who develop mental problems and start driving recklessly." Edward understood that Albright was planning to murder him and disguise it as a traffic accident caused by mental instability. And if I say no?" Albright's laugh was chilling. "Sophia, you're smart. You know that's not really an option. My organization has resources you can't even imagine. I can make you disappear completely, new identities, a new life in another country. Or I can make you disappear in a much less pleasant way." Maria made a muffled sound, clearly terrified by the implied threat. "D.A. Albright," Sophia said calmly. "And can I ask a question about your organization?" "Of course. How many families have you destroyed in recent years?" "We haven't destroyed them, Sophia. We've reorganized them. We've taken companies from weak and inefficient men and put them into the hands of more competent people, like Uncle Rob. Robert was just an employee, just like all the other partners we used. The real competence is here, in this office." Edward heard the sound of drawers being opened. "Want to see how it really works, Sophia?" Albright's voice showed perverse pride. "Here are the dossiers on all our operations. 15 companies acquired, a total net worth of over $50 million. $50 million, Sophia sounded impressed. "How do you hide so much money?" "Through shell corporations, offshore accounts, investments in tax havens. I have lawyers, judges, and prosecutors in 3 states working for me." Edward could hardly believe what he was hearing. Albright was confessing to crimes that could result in decades in prison, and no one ever suspected. Who would suspect a respected prosecutor? "I use my position to shut down any investigation before it begins. When someone tries to investigate me, I simply create evidence of corruption against them." "That's very clever." Sophia said with feigned admiration. But what if someone recorded this conversation? Edward felt his heart stop. Sophia, do you really think I'm stupid? Albright's voice changed completely, becoming menacing. This office has electronic device detectors. I know exactly where the transmitter sewn into your collar is and the tracker in your shoe. Edward, Mendoza yelled in the car. They knew from the start. Albright's voice continued over the audio. And I know Edward and his little friends are listening to every word of this conversation. Hello, Edward, waiting outside like an idiot while your little protege walks into a trap. Edward grabbed the radio. All cars, immediate entry. Sophia is in extreme danger. Not so fast, Albright said over the transmitter. If any of you try to enter this building, Sophia and Maria will never leave here alive. I have 12 armed men strategically positioned. Edward looked at the building, feeling completely helpless. What do you want, Albright? I want you to come here alone, Edward, without weapons, without recording devices, without backup. Come surrender, and maybe I'll spare the lives of the girl and her mother. Sophia spoke for the first time in several minutes. Uncle Eddie, don't come. It's a trap. Silence. Child, Albright snarled. Edward looked at Mendoza, seeing in his eyes the same terrible understanding. They had been completely outmatched by an adversary who had anticipated every move. You have 5 minutes to decide, Edward. Albright continued. Your life for theirs. Seems like a fair trade, considering they're in this situation because of you. Edward closed his eyes, knowing there was only one possible choice. Sophia and Maria had risked everything to save him, and now it was his turn to return the sacrifice. I'm going, he said into the radio. Edward, no, Mendoza yelled. It's suicide. Carlos, take care of them. No matter what happens to me, make sure Sophia and Maria are safe. Edward got out of the car and began to walk toward the building, each step bringing him closer to what he knew would be his final destiny. But at least Sophia and Maria would have a chance to survive. What he didn't know was that Sophia had prepared one last trump card, something that not even Albright's electronic detectors could discover. Edward walked through the building's lobby with heavy steps, each movement bringing him closer to what he believed was his end. Albright's security guards escorted him silently to the elevator, frisking him thoroughly before allowing him to ascend. They found and confiscated his cell phone, but there was nothing else to find. On the 15th floor, the office door opened before he even knocked. Decker, Albright was there, smiling with the satisfaction of a predator who had finally captured his prey. Edward, my old friend, Albright said with false cordiality. Come in, please. Sophia and Maria are eager to see you. Edward entered the office, and his heart broke when he saw Sophia and Maria sitting on the sofa, surrounded by 2 armed men. Sophia seemed smaller than ever, but her eyes showed a determination that surprised him. Uncle Eddie, she said calmly, I'm so sorry I put you in this situation. Sophia, none of this is your fault, Edward replied, trying to convey strength through his voice. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Albright walked to his desk, clearly savoring the moment. What a touching reunion. Edward, sit down. We have some matters to resolve before the final outcome. Edward remained standing. Ma'am, what do you want, Albright? First, I want you to sign these documents transferring all your companies and assets to a charity organization that will coincidentally I manage. And then you'll have a tragic accident. A depressed businessman, tormented by false accusations, decides to end his own suffering. Edward looked at Sophia, who seemed to be studying something in her hands. It was her colorful notebook, which she had somehow managed to keep with her. E.D.A. Albright, Sophia suddenly said. Can I ask one last question before you hurt Uncle Eddie? Of course, child. Consider it a professional courtesy. Sophia flipped through a few pages of her notebook. You said you have judges and prosecutors working for you in 3 states. What are their names? Albright laughed. Sophia, do you still think you can collect evidence? All your devices have been neutralized. I know, Sophia said simply. I'm just curious. Edward watched Sophia, trying to understand her plan. The girl seemed strangely calm for someone in mortal danger. "Why not?" Albright said arrogantly. "You're going to die anyway. Dr. Marcus Thorne in California, Dr. Eleanor Vance in Texas, Dr. Paul Rodriguez right here." Sophia wrote carefully in her notebook, "and the lawyers. Dr. Robert Perdue, Dr. Christina Sanchez, Dr. John Miller." Albright listed the names with perverse pride. Clearly satisfied to demonstrate the reach of his corruption network, Edward couldn't understand why Sophia was collecting information that would die with them. But then he noticed something strange. As she wrote, Sophia pressed the pencil very hard, as if she was trying to engrave the words through several pages. "And the offshore bank accounts?" Sophia asked innocently. "Cayman Islands Central Bank, account number 44728891. Swiss International Bank, account 77388924. Albright recited the numbers as if reading a shopping list. Suddenly, Edward understood what Sophia was doing. She wasn't just writing, she was creating an impression of the information on the lower pages of the notebook. Even if they destroyed the visible page, the information would remain etched on the sheets below. "Enough questions," Albright said impatiently. "Edward, sign the documents." "Never. Then perhaps we need additional motivation." Albright gestured to one of his men, who pointed the gun directly at Maria. "No!" Edward shouted. "Leave them alone. Sign the papers, and she lives." Edward looked at Sophia, who made an almost imperceptible nod. She wanted him to sign. But why? With trembling hands, Edward picked up the pen and began to sign the documents. Each signature was like a dagger to his soul. But if it would give Sophia and Maria a few more minutes of life, it was worth any sacrifice. "Excellent," Albright said when Edward finished. "Now, the last part of our meeting." Albright opened a drawer and pulled out a pistol. "Edward, you're going to commit suicide with this gun, a shot to the head, quick and efficient. And if I refuse, then you'll watch Sophia and Maria die slowly before you." Edward looked at the two people who had become his true family. "D.A. Albright, can I hug them one last time?" "As you wish, but make it quick." Edward walked to the sofa and hugged Maria, whispering in her ear, "Forgive me for all this." Then he turned to Sophia. The girl's hug was surprisingly strong, and when her lips were close to Edward's ear, she whispered something that made his heart pound. "The notebook is connected to Uncle Carlos's cell phone via Bluetooth. He's hearing everything." Edward almost lost control. Sophia had found a way to keep communication active, even with all of Albright's electronic detectors. Her intelligence had surpassed Albright's technology. "Uncle Eddie," Sophia said aloud, "before you die, I want you to know that I love you like a true father." "I love you too, little one," Edward replied, understanding that she was buying time for Mendoza to act. "Enough with the sentimentality," Albright snarled. "Edward, intake the gun." Edward slowly extended his hand toward the pistol, gaining every precious second. "D.A. Albright, can I ask one last question?" "What? How did you manage to corrupt so many justice officials?" "Simple. Everyone has a price. Some accept money, others prefer blackmail. Discovering people's weaknesses is my specialty." At that exact moment, the building lights went out completely. In the total darkness that followed, Edward heard the sound of breaking glass, shouted commands, and the sound of people invading the office. Federal agents. "Nobody move!" Powerful flashlights illuminated the office, revealing heavily armed agents pointing their weapons at Albright and his men. In a matter of seconds, all the criminals were disarmed and handcuffed. "How?" Albright stammered, completely stunned. Carlos Mendoza entered the office, carrying a tablet that showed the complete recording of Albright's confession. "D.A. Henry Albright, you are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, corruption, extortion, and attempted murder." Edward looked at Sophia, who smiled shyly despite the tears in her eyes. "How did you manage to keep communication active?" "Remember the book with the secret compartment?" I disassembled one of the old transmitters and hid the parts in my notebook. When I pressed hard while writing, it activated the emergency system that connected directly to Uncle Carlos's cell phone. Edward knelt and hugged Sophia tightly. "You saved our lives again." "We saved each other," Sophia corrected. "That's what families do." 3 weeks after D.A. Albright's arrest, Edward walked through the corridors of the courthouse accompanied by Sophia and Maria. This time, however, he was not there as a defendant, but as the principal witness in one of the largest corruption cases in the state's judicial history. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and other businessmen who had been victims of the criminal organization. Edward recognized several faces, men who, like him, had lost everything to a scheme that seemed impossible to detect. "Uncle Eddie," Sophia whispered, adjusting the new dress he had bought for her. "Are you nervous?" "A little," Edward admitted, looking at the girl who had become the center of his life. "And you?" "No. I'm eager to see D.A. Albright get the punishment he deserves." The presiding judge, Judge David Larson, a highly respected figure brought in from another state to ensure impartiality, called the first witness. Edward watched D.A. Albright being led to the defendant's chair in handcuffs, a sight that brought him a bitter satisfaction. Robert Hayes had been captured 2 days after Albright, trying to flee to Mexico with forged documents. The corruption network had collapsed like a house of cards when Sophia provided all the information she had collected. "Mr. Edward Santana," the special prosecutor called, "can you tell us how you discovered the existence of this criminal organization?" Edward looked at Sophia before answering. "Actually, prosecutor, it was a 7-year-old girl named Sophia Sanchez who discovered it. I was too blind to see the betrayal right before my eyes." During the next 2 hours, Edward recounted the entire saga, from the first suspicions to the final confrontation in Albright's office. When he reached the part about Sophia's intelligence and courage, his voice choked with emotion. "Mr. Santana," Albright's defense lawyer asked, "isn't it true that your company was facing financial difficulties, making you an easy target for swindlers?" "No," Edward responded firmly. "My company was solid. I was just an easy target because I trusted people blindly and believed in human kindness." "And isn't it true that you invented this whole story to get revenge on Deacon Albright for prosecuting you?" Sophia stood up abruptly in her seat. "Objection! That question is offensive and ignores all the evidence already presented." The judge smiled slightly. "Miss Sophia, while I appreciate your passion for justice, it is the prosecutor who should be making objections." Sophia blushed and sat down, but Edward saw the pride in Maria's eyes. The girl had become a minor celebrity after the events, receiving invitations to speak about courage and justice. When it was Sophia's turn to testify, the entire courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness stand with firm steps, carrying her famous, colorful notebook. "Sophia," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell us how a 7-year-old girl managed to discover a criminal organization that had been operating for years undetected?" "Mr. Prosecutor," Sophia replied, with her characteristic seriousness, "I didn't discover it because I'm smart. I discovered it because I paid attention. Adults are sometimes too busy to notice obvious things." "What kind of things?" Sophia opened her notebook. "People who pretend to be friends, but their eyes don't smile along with their mouths. Conversations that stop when you get close. People who ask questions about you, but never tell anything about themselves." Edward watched fascinated as Sophia managed to explain complex concepts so simply and clearly. "And how did you know you needed to record evidence?" "In the detective books Uncle Eddie gave me, investigators always need proof. Words alone aren't enough. You need evidence that people can't deny." And Albright watched Sophia with a mix of hatred and reluctant admiration. He had been defeated by a child who had used his own arrogance against him. "Sophia," the judge asked, Do you have a message for other children who might be watching this trial? Sophia thought for a moment. Yes. I want to say that kids aren't too small to make a difference. If you see something wrong happening, tell a trusted adult. And if the first adult doesn't believe you, tell another. Keep telling until someone listens. The entire room erupted in spontaneous applause, bringing tears to the eyes of many present. When the lawyers finished their closing arguments, the judge retired to deliberate. Edward, Sophia, and Maria left the courthouse and walked to a nearby park, where they sat on a bench under a leafy tree. "Dad, Edward," Sophia said, swinging her legs, which didn't quite reach the ground. "And what's going to happen now?" Edward looked at his new family, Maria, who had become not only the manager of his home, but his confidant and friend, and Sophia, who had become the light of his life. "Now, little one, we're going to live. We're going to be a real family. And the company will continue, but with new values. We'll create a program to help single mothers like your mom, and an educational fund for gifted children like you." Sophia smiled. "And we'll help other people who were tricked like you were." "Especially that," Edward confirmed. "We'll create a foundation to assist victims of criminal organizations." Maria, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Edward, how can we thank you for everything you've done for us?" "Maria, I'm the one who should be thanking you. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever, the ability to trust in human kindness." 2 hours later, they received the call they had been eagerly awaiting. Carlos Mendoza had located Albright's last secret offshore bank account, containing over $15 million stolen from his victims. That money will go back to the families who were harmed, Edward explained to Sophia. "And what's left will finance our foundation for many years." "Does that mean we can help even more people?" "It means we can help people for the rest of our lives." Sophia skipped with joy, then stopped and became serious. "Dad, Edward, can I ask for something?" "Anything, little one. When I grow up and get a real law degree, can I keep working here at the foundation?" Edward felt his eyes well up. "Sophia, this foundation exists because of you. It will always be your home. And when I'm very old, can I teach other kids to be detectives like I was?" "You can, and you should. The world needs more detectives like you." As they talked, more people arrived at the foundation's office, families seeking help, volunteer lawyers offering their services, law students wanting to learn about fraud investigation. The place was becoming exactly what Edward had dreamed, a center of hope and justice. In the afternoon, when everyone had left, Edward, Maria, and Sophia sat on the office couch, looking out the window at the same courthouse where it had all begun. "Dad, Edward," Sophia said, cuddling into his arms, "you know what the best part of this whole story is?" "What, little one?" "That we discovered that family isn't just about who's born together. Family is about who chooses to stay together and protect each other." Edward hugged Sophia and Maria, feeling a profound gratitude for the winding path that had led them to each other. He had lost a partner he thought was a brother, but he had gained a daughter and a companion who were his true family. "Sophia," Maria said softly, "you're right. And you know what else I learned?" "What?" "Mom, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the most beautiful things in our lives." Edward looked at the two women who had transformed his existence and understood that Maria was absolutely right. Robert's betrayal and Albright's conspiracy, however painful they had been the path that led him to the family he had always wished for. Outside the window, the sun set over the city, painting the sky with golden hues that symbolized new beginnings and renewed hope. And in the office of the Sofia Sanchez Foundation, a family built on love, courage, and justice planned ways to protect other families from the predators who hid behind masks of respectability. The girl who had saved a millionaire with her exceptional courage now dedicated her life to saving others, proving that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in the good we do in the world. And so, in the same courthouse where he almost lost everything, Edward found not only his freedom, but his true purpose, protecting the innocent alongside the most extraordinary family anyone could wish for. The story that had begun with betrayal and despair ended with love, justice, and the promise that as long as people like Sofia Sanchez exist in the world, truth will always find a courageous voice to defend it.